questions.
Mr. Willick, anything further?
No further.
And then, Mr. Towers, your preference is to just make your argument when we do our closings, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
As opposed to testifying or being, yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so Mr. Willick, we'll hear first from you.
Very good, Your Honor. I won't belabor what you've already heard. I think you probably caught it, although I understand there is a language barrier, and that makes this always a little bit more difficult. I think, actually, all the testimony, all the exhibits, and oddly enough, even most of the arguments are consistent. It's just a matter of perception and perceived power and status. What she says is, you decided for yourself in answer to almost everything. And his follow-up question, well, if I decide and you acquiesce to it, that means you decided. That's perfectly consistent with what led to this case. They had return tickets on the day they left Israel. She didn't find out that they weren't going home till after they were here, when he told her. His defense is, well, you didn't insist on going back, so you must have agreed to stay. Then he said he needed a few weeks. She said, all right. And he said he needed a month. She said, all right. Then he said he needed 3 months, and she didn't answer at all. She is trying to get a green card. There's all kinds of machinations and power struggles in this marriage. He wants to get her a green card so that he can tell her that she has to work under his control here. She wants a green card to make sure he can't send her back without her children. He alleges that she's had intimate conversations with a friend in Israel. Of course, if that's true, and I don't know if it's true or not, that would only indicate a continuing motive from before she ever left to want to go back home. There is nothing except his opinions, his journals, his instructions, his decisions that says she wanted to ever live in America. She's been pretty consistent the whole time that her life is there. She was born there. She was raised there. She was married there. Both of her children were born there. She's had a job there. She's got cars there, an apartment there, furniture, and family. The only thing that's here is him. And he has unilaterally decided that it's better for him, and therefore, in his mind, better for her and the kids to be in the United States. But it doesn't work that way. Even though he's got this weird living agreement thing, which I read, which says she subordinates her will to him and allows him to make decisions for her life. That doesn't play in an American courtroom. You don't give up equal protection of the laws no matter what your husband has you sign the day before you get married. She has the right to go home. She has the right to have the children be in their habitual residence. As a matter of child custody jurisdiction, the only court anywhere in the world that can enter a custody decision relating to these kids is in the state of Israel. And unless we get an order from an Israeli court relinquishing that power to the United States, and there's no way in heck she's going to stipulate to it. So the kids have to go back. And they should go back immediately. Oh, one little thing on the Facebook item. I tried an experiment while we were sitting here in open court. If you change your location on Facebook, Facebook enters an entry on your Facebook page that says you've moved. You don't have to tell it to. Just tell it you're in a different location, and a message will pop up saying, Marshall, Fred, Todd has moved to whatever place you enter. So when she told Facebook she was in Vegas, it announced to the world she'd moved here. It means nothing. I changed mine back. I don't really have anything else to say. It's really that simple. She's an Israeli mother with Israeli children held involuntarily in the United States. You may think he deserves a Father of the Year award for not using chains and a gun to keep her here, but hiding the documents is exactly the same thing. Todd should be given until tomorrow noon to turn over the necessary travel documents to my office. Failing that, he should go to jail, and she should get an order allowing replacement passports. There's really no more to say. There's really no more to do. His explanation of the hostage situation is on page 23 of his filing. It meant Esther and Adele could return to Israel for Esther's requested purpose, meaning her stated purpose, of attending the baby naming, but that Liam should remain in Midbar Kodesh Elementary in his father's care until Esther and Adele's return. He wants a hostage. He's not entitled to one. Both of these children are habitual residents of the state of Israel. They must be returned upon request to their state of habitual residence. There are no exceptions. There's no ifs. There's no ands. There's no buts. There's no exception to the Hague Convention under any of the articles that would apply. She has an absolute right to return with them there. What happens in terms of custody? Not my department. A court with jurisdiction could decide that the kids need to live with dad. Court could decide the kids need to live with mom. Court could decide that time ought to be split between them. But that's not my job. My job is to invoke the Hague Convention and send the kids back to the only place where the only court can make the decision as to where the kids should live. That's what the convention says. That she has a right to not have them retained against their will, which is wrongful, where it's in breach of her rights of custody attributed to a person under the laws of the state where the child was habitually resident immediately before the retention, and at the time of the retention, those rights were actually being exercised, or would have been exercised but for the retention. And then the convention says on its face, it explicitly includes the right to decide where the children are present. That means home, Israel. And that's her right as a custodial parent, either jointly or alone under 3B. Finally, when the court makes its determination, you have to decide what to do with the $16,000 this exercise has cost. It could have cost zero. Zero. The fact that I gave Mr. Towers the relevant legal information, and being a fourth-year law student, I know he's able to read it. And I gave him the names of lawyers if he wanted them, or encouraged him to find others if he didn't, to confer. He's conferred with half a dozen law firms in this town. He knows that's what the rules are. He just can't wrap his mind around the possibility that what he wants and what the law requires are not the same thing. They're not. She has an absolute duty to, an absolute right to return to her place of residence and the habitual residence of the children, with the children.